This week's Torah portion is called Kedoshim. And in it we read at the very beginning, God says to Moses, tell all the Jewish people that they are to be holy, that you're to be kadosh, because I, God, am holy. And over and over again in this week's Torah portion, we read about be holy because I, God, am holy. So we have an imperative to be holy. God is holy. God is the source of holiness. God is everything that there is in the world. And God is that source of holiness. So if we want to be holy, we have to connect ourselves to that source of holiness, to God. So when God first created the world, before creation, there was only God. In order to create the world, the mystics teach us, the Kabbalists teach us that God withdrew. God sort of created a space, so to speak, so that there could be a creation. There could be something that exists, that thinks, that has a perception that it's separate from God. So God withdrew to create a space within which all of creation was created. And then God infused all of creation with godliness, but hid behind the scenes. So we don't perceive God. We have to look for God, but God withdrew. So if we want to be godlike, if we want to be holy, and to be godlike is to be holy, we have to act like God does. So when we look in the beginning of creation, we see that God withdrew to create the creation. So too, we have to withdraw. We have to withdraw in order to allow others to have their independence, to allow others to exist. There has to be a minimization of self. We can't just fill up the whole room, so to speak. There has to be a withdrawal. So when we imitate God, when we are God-like, we bring holiness into the world and we become holy ourselves. So the first way I suggest of doing that is by withdrawing. God created the world, so too we create. We have the capacity to create another generation. We have the capacity to create all sorts of things in this world, which God is showing us how to do and how to be. We can create love and compassion and goodness. We should be doing those things because God does those things. God created Adam and Eve. They made the mistake of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and as a result of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they perceived themselves to be naked, and they were embarrassed and they were ashamed, and God clothed them. God clothed Adam and Eve, clothed the naked. If we want to be godlike, like God in the world, we also have to clothe the naked. When Abraham circumcised himself, 3 angels representing God come to visit him and his sickness. And we also understand Kabbalistically that any sick person has the Shekhinah, has the divine presence at their head, at their bedside. So too, if we want to be godlike, if we want to be holy, we have to visit the sick. God fed the Jewish people as they were wandering in the desert. God fed them manna from heaven. Food came down from heaven. Jewish people were hungry. God fed the hungry. We look into the Torah, we see God fed the hungry. We too should feed the hungry. That is an imperative of how to be godlike and therefore how to be holy. So we have feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, withdrawing to allow space for others, being a creator. And the last example I want to give is that God, we understand, God buried Moses. When Moses dies in Deuteronomy, God buries him. And that is our source of understanding our imperative to bury the dead, that we have to be godlike in order to achieve holiness. And it's all about holiness. It's all about connection to God. So the first way that we learn in our Torah to be holy is to imitate God, is to be godlike, to do the things that we see in the Torah that God does, to see the things in the world that we understand that God does, visits the sick, clothes the naked, feeds the hungry, buries the dead, makes space for others to exist, creates and gives. So those are my examples I'd like to provide of how to imitate God in this world. Another way, and this Torah portion is replete with mitzvot, with the ways in which we connect ourselves to God. Mitzvot are connectors. There are 613 ways that we are given, many different ways that we're given to connect ourselves to the divine, to bring the divine light in. It's almost like there's a window and we can open the window and can let the light in. We have 613 windows that we can open to let the light in, to let the holiness in, to connect ourselves to that holiness. And many times before we do a mitzvah, we say a blessing, Baruch atah Hashem, you God are the source of all blessing. Asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav vetzivanu, that through the mitzvot we are sanctified, we are elevated, we are holy, we connect ourselves to God. So we can be giving charity, we can be giving money to the poor, good thing to do. And if we do it because it's a connector, that we have an intention to connect ourselves to God, that we make giving the charitable donation holy. It becomes holy because it's used as a connector to connect us to God. So some of the things in this week's Torah portion are self-evident. We would probably do a lot of different things that are in this week's Torah portion. We would probably leave the corner of our field for the poor people. We would probably not bear a grudge or take revenge against our neighbor, or we would not slander. We would revere our parents and stand up for them when they enter the room, respecting our elderly. We would be understand the sacredness of life. We would not put a stumbling block before a blind man, which has many different ramifications. We would probably self-evidently institute justice in our society, that it's important to be honest, that it's important to be just in our society, and so on. But there are many mitzvot given in this week's Torah portion that perhaps we wouldn't come up with on our own, such as not mixing seeds, or not crossbreeding animals, or not wearing clothing that has wool and cotton in the same fabric, that we shouldn't wear clothing that mixes the wool and the linen together, that we shouldn't cut ourselves when we're mourning the loss of our beloved loved ones, that we shouldn't practice divination or sorcery, that we shouldn't eat blood, that we shouldn't put tattoos on our body, and so on and so on. There are many mitzvahs given in this week's Torah portion. But the point that I want to bring out is that if you go back to the beginning where it says, you Jewish people should be holy because I, God, am holy. So we want to connect ourselves to God, the source of holiness, to be holy, to elevate ourselves, to be transcendent, to be something above the mundane. And we have mitzvahs to do that, and we have how God operates in the world that we can learn how to imitate, so we could be godlike, and we can also achieve that holiness. So the intention is important. Yes, we can give our charitable donations, but if we do it because we want that connection, we want to open up the window and have the light shine in and be in the flow of that light and be the cause of that light coming into the world, then we're doing something holy. And that's what we're enjoined to do. That's the imperative that is this week's Torah portion of Kedoshim to you. You should be holy because I, God, am holy. And I bless us that as we journey through life, that we find many opportunities to connect ourselves to godliness, that we have many opportunities to do for other people, to help other people, to help ourselves, and to connect ourselves to the source of all holiness by imitating God, by burying the dead, by clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, giving, creating, making space for others, and also through all the mitzvot that we're given as a gift to connect us to the divine source of all holiness.